it sound really amateurish if I say, what do you mean you're going live? How does that work?
It's live streamed to YouTube. So if anybody just wants to watch or wants to watch a recording, they can do that. I meant to, and was perhaps in. Well, we are now actually. Okay. All right. Sorry. I heard you asking that question again. Of course, you weren't. I heard it. It is now live on YouTube. Okay. Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome to another Kaizen Central. Delighted to be with you today. We've got a growing number of people joining us. Hello, there's somebody just wanting admission, and this will happen. I'm sorry that if I keep interrupting myself to say I've got to admit somebody, it's because I'm also the gatekeeper. Very delighted to welcome Steve Murphy. Good evening, Steve.
Good evening, Nick. Good evening, everybody. Did
you have a good holiday, Steve?
Brilliant. I mean, we looked out in the Lake District. It was lovely and sunny, obviously, last week. And we were in a really quiet place. There was no phone signal. Broughton-in-Furness, I think it was.
Well, you'll be very near where Mr. Leahy is. Is that right, Barry?
Not too far, yeah. Anything Furness.
Sorry?
Yeah.
We're in Ulverston, so yeah, you'd have passed through.
Yeah. Broughton-in-Furness was right up a bunch of little roads, like, you know. Yeah. And there was no phone signal, and there's no shop for 5 miles or so. So yeah. It's just nice to be in the Lake District where it's not too crowded, you know.
I was there last year and had a wonderful, wonderful time. Jill, good evening to you. Very nice to see you. First time you've been with us. And Alec, hello again.
Good evening.
Okay. Oh, I've got somebody else coming in. Just forgive me if I get sidetracked now and again because we've got Sam Bainham joining us.
When you become more experienced with this, Nick, you'll be able to just automatically just do that without even breaking sentence. We won't even know that you're doing it.
Oh no, come on! I like there yet. You know me, ever the professional, ever the professional. Welcome, Sam. Nice to see you. Okay. Now then, it's Adam Payne, who's a regular on Kaizen Central. Can't be with us tonight. He's got a family event, but he caused quite a stir. Not quite a stir, but he caused quite a lot of discussion on LinkedIn, talking about the number of people at director level he'd heard from, and he's got a very wide network, who were in the process of being laid off. And he was asking the question, I mean, are we on the verge of some kind of shockwave about to hit us, given that furlough ends at the end of October 31st? And I suppose none of us, we're not in the prognostication prediction business, but we can ask the question: can a company organize itself in such a way that these systemic shocks, we've got COVID, and then we've got the horrendous possibility of a lot of problems when the end of the transition period for Brexit comes along at the end of December. What can a company do to prepare itself for systemic shocks? I'd like to throw that open to the floor to see if anybody would like to pick that up. Has anybody got any experience of managing a company that has had systemic shocks and has been able to work their way through it successfully?
Yes.
Yeah. I wondered if you might answer that one, Mr. Barry.
I don't particularly want to answer it, but I'll throw something in if you like. No, I mean, it's no secret if you read anything, the stuff we put out there. Playdale's a huge turnaround business, and 5 years ago we were, well, I was in a meeting with the regional bank director who said he was winding the business up, you know, and it was literally like, right, that's it, you're on, you know. Well, I'll tell you what, this is what we'll do, and this is what we'll do in the next week. And it was a typical family-run business that had run it as a lifestyle and just, you know, built a beautiful property portfolio, but not any, you know, no rainy day fund, and it was definitely a rainy day situation. And the balance sheet was shot because of it. And we just had to, well, we had to be transparent. We had to make big changes, and big changes quickly. And we had to ensure, you know, the way we've done it, and we were named Turnaround Business of the Year in the UK. But, you know, it's just making sure everyone was engaged and in traction and going in the same direction as we were. And that doesn't happen overnight. That goes with some, you know, some painful conversations. There's, you know, some grown-up conversations. There's a whole, but it's having conversations. It's talking to people. It's explaining where we're at, because we're in, you know, no one likes to admit failure, or no one likes to talk about the word profits and stuff like that in a family business. And we just completely opened and, you know, said, this is where we're at. And we thought everyone would flood for the hills and end up being brought in furnace, or you know, and they didn't. You know, people put the shoulder to the wheel, and it's been great. And the culture, the difference in 5 years is just night and day. It really is.
What did you tell the bank, Barry, that persuaded them to let you go ahead if they were already there with their axe ready to wield it?
It was a detailed plan. So we went in there with a very detailed plan that I'd got something like 48 hours to put together. I mean, down to pennies. It literally was down to pennies about which car we were going to sell, and silly stuff, unbelievable. You know, we were going to reduce the coffee, you know, and all this, you know, life critical stuff. And
bring your own biro, yeah.
Yeah, well, seriously, one of the biggest lessons. I'm glad you said that. So you got into the detail, and every business, I believe, should go through a crisis. It's the best thing that's ever happened to Playdale. You know, our profitability, you know, on a small SME that we are, our profitability swung by over £1 million. You know, and that's just nuts. And in the first year, we saved £16,000 on paper and ink. Right? That's £50 a day. I don't know how you spend £50 a day on paper and ink. Never mind, save it. Right. We had a stationery amnesty in the stationery cupboard. Yeah, one guy had 60,000 staples in his top drawer. I was like, "What you doing? Going to effing war?" You know, it's like, what you do, and all of those pennies added up to some big numbers, you know, and it wasn't bring your own biro. We allowed people to have a biro, but we went paperless. It fast-tracked paperless. I don't want biros. You know, what are we doing?
I think sometimes paper goes on like the local football club and stuff like that, you know. If business is friendly and you know, and so somebody comes in with, they need 100 sheets of kit lists for the Boy Scouts or something, and before you know it, you're running every charity in the neighbourhood from your photocopier.
Yeah, and one of the things we did was a CSR policy just for that. You know, because we'd get, I don't know, 2 or 3 begging letters a week. You know, we're a big business in that, you know, in a small area, and we would, you know, the amount of kits we've got sponsored, it's, you know, it's never sold one item of playground equipment, you know, and we timed it badly because we used to have a hoarding at Barrow Football Club, you know, when they were still non-league. Now they're in the big time. I bet the price of that's gone up. But, you know, but it didn't sell any playgrounds. It was just someone asked, so therefore we did. You know, now the staff vote for 3 charities a year. You know, they all have a vote. They can all bring as many as they want. We get a short list of about 7 or 8. They then present, and then all the staff have an individual vote, and we choose 3, and the staff do probably twice as many activities for those 3 now, and we get loads of engagement, and we're raising as much money as BAE down the road with 9,000 staff. You know, and we don't have to put towards it, and we do put towards it. Like we'll say, oh, we'll cover the minibus for that or something. But you know, we've made savings through that. I mean, it was
that's a really great story, Barry. And you know, it's amazing how costs can just sort of fritter away, and until you actually get a grasp of it. We were having this discussion, Steve. You were part of that discussion with Adam as well, I believe. We were talking about it's all very well for a company to say, well, I'm solid on my growth forecasts, and I'm solid on my production, got everything right. But you said it doesn't matter a jot if you can't go out and sell the stuff. And you had a number of your the clients you've worked with who said to themselves, we're going great guns, we've invested in this, that, and the other. And you've come back and said, well, actually, that's all very well, but can you actually sell it? Do you want to tell that story?
Oh, this mainly came from when I was doing a bit of auditing. And what I found was that being as we were buying products from people, we were buying bits of this and bits of that. Whenever I asked them about quality or continuous improvement or anything like that, they'd bring me a whole string of stories. They were hot seating biros, recycling paper clips, saving every drachma in manufacturing. And I said, well, okay, fine. But I want to be in a position, I want to be in a position where we can continue to buy from you as a company. And so, that's the efficient running of your production line is one thing, but what are you doing to improve your sales and marketing? And I specifically asked people, and it wasn't a curveball. It was like, this is an annual review, and this is an agendaed item. So I expect them to come with at least something for an agendaed item. And you'd get, I say, well, tell me what happens if you don't get a sale. Do you, if we scrap a batch in manufacturing, we run a 4-8D, everybody gets pulled in. What do you do if you don't make a sale? How do you have a process? And now they weren't totally slack or anything, but it was more like, we have a bit of a chat and see what we can do better. Well, have you got a team? Does the team fall into Belvin team roles? Do you have all the people in the team do you think will really make a contribution to this problem solving? And realistically, with the exception of one Japanese company who seemed to have it down to the nearest drachma, and really in every aspect of when we dealt with them, were really hot on business building, quality, continuous improvement from Kaizen to strategic level. They were terrific, but everybody else really was a bit so. And the way I was looking at it as well is that I took the lesson from like one of these Jack Welch things that says, if he was making something for $10 and selling it for $100 and making 15% profit, well, that's $25 accounted for. Where does the other 75 go? And it all goes in their sales department, in their purchasing department, in marketing. So, I was pushing these people and I was saying, well, your quality is great, improving that in manufacturing. But if you want to stay in business, you've really got to improve the efficiency. And in one case, I was pushing this woman a bit hard, this marketing lady, and I mean she was okay, but the European director of marketing, her boss was sat next to her, and I think he was just about howling himself laughing, because I think he'd been asking these guys exactly the same question. So it's a bit like when I started working and doing sort of audits, I really did start to push people on saying, well, what is everything you're doing to make sure this business is going to be here in 2 years' time, and I'm still working with you people, which is good, because you've really got to start working on waste reduction and business building in all aspects. And I suppose it was a bit shocking. The Japanese were great, but I expected a bit more from the others, but it really wasn't there.
Well,
that's
a really instructive story. Thanks for that. Just like to introduce Jill. Jill, it's your first time with us. Do you want to just give us a very quick, 15-second introduction to what you do?
Okay. I'm currently working for a company called Formula Plastics, and we're injection molders, and we're based in County Durham, and
Brilliant.
we're predominantly automotive.
Okay, fantastic.
But prior to that, I did have my own business, injection molding business, which I ran for 27 years. And unfortunately, I went into liquidation just over a year ago. So I've had a bit of a tough year, really. But I'm in a nice job now that I thoroughly enjoy.
Well, that's brilliant. And I mean, okay, I'm sorry to intrude on private grief, but you've heard what Barry was talking about, and you've heard what Steve was talking about. Have you got any sort of lessons you'd want to throw into the into the discussion that you drew from your obviously very painful experience?
I don't know, really. My story was a little bit different, because the reason that we went into liquidation was Storm Desmond. The business was flooded, and the insurance people didn't pay out.
Oh,
so,
okay.
So it's not the way I ran the business, or but I mean, what people are saying is right. You really do have to take care of the pennies, and the pounds take care of themselves. I think I learned that quite early on in business, and the stories about paper and staples, and it's all very relevant. Whatever your business is, you've got to keep an eye on everything like that.
Well, I suppose if you're not looking at the small stuff, then you're not looking at the big stuff either.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. And welcome to Alec, and hello Angela and Sam, and anybody else who hasn't chatted yet. Anybody who wants to get into the conversation. Alec, are you? What are your thoughts? You've been in business a while. You've been watching these what's going on. Are you in fear of existence at the moment?
No, we're in perpetual crisis. I'm waiting for it to end. So we've only had one crisis in 30 years. So, but I think, like all these things, particularly in this current sort of circumstances, it's always cash is king. You have to look after the cash, and the reason we are still in business is because we've managed cash. And then I go and meet banks and people like that, and they start lecturing me on cash flow, which I think is quite ironic, because trust me, I'm Scottish. Nobody knows more about cash flow than I do, and robbing Peter to pay Paul, and but it is tough, and you have to focus and make sacrifices. But picking up on your initial comments, I know of two senior level directors who've been made redundant in the last, well, certainly in September. One at one of our major competitors, which was a bit of a shock, and one's an ops director in an infrastructure business in the computers. So, yeah, things are tough, and I think it's going to get a lot tougher if we look at the.
I think about it in two ways. One is, when a company is small, you usually start off with the founders, and then as the company grows, and you need a director in charge of ... If the company is going to be under significant pressure, particularly cash pressure, it is in effect shrinking. It's got to shrink. And so you end up in a situation where you say, well, I'm sorry, we don't need two directors, one for this and one for that. We're going to have one director who's going to be responsible for both of them. Because otherwise, if we keep all of our directors, we're going to end up having to lay off everybody who's doing everything, and we won't be able to sell anything at all because we can't make it. Kind of approach. I had a similar, I mean, it's not similar because it's not actually in a manufacturing environment, but it was a situation where we ran a multifaceted business that had been formed through merger in order to serve very big clients. These were big pharmaceutical companies. And one of those very big clients, one of our very biggest clients, represented way more of a proportion of our business than we were comfortable with. They were represented about 30% of our business. And they merged with another company who wasn't a client, and we lost the business. And we lost the business overnight. Purchase orders got cancelled. It was that kind of deal. And so we went from a very, very, very healthy, lovely situation to, oh my goodness, we're in deep trouble. Because the very first thing that happened was the cash flow stopped. Just absolutely stopped. And we ended up working out that the very best thing that we could do was to basically diverge again. So we unmerged. We didn't unmerge in exactly the same structure as we had merged, but we basically broke up the business, and the people who were responsible for those bits of business bought it in order to prevent the entire business going into receivership. And that was just a different way of solving the problem. Now, those new businesses, 3 years later, were collectively making about 4 times more money than the original conglomerate business was making. So it ended up being the right decision. And part of that was because some of the people who were in senior positions, senior employee positions, became directors in their own new smaller company, and their attitudes changed from being a senior employee to being I own this. And that turned into a very successful resolution to what could have been a nasty problem.
Oh, that's interesting.
That doesn't always end well, though. I've seen other instances where people have become the owner and not realised that even if you're the owner of a small company, you're still actually required to work. It's not.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, you're actually required to work even harder.
They don't tell you that up front, though. But I think it was Barry last week. I think you said, was it only last week, Barry? I can't remember. It seems like such a long time ago now. But I struggle with the engagement, that there's this correlation between the people in the business. Everybody's interests must be aligned. You know, selling product, making profit pays wages. It's not a difficult concept to follow, is it?
Yeah.
But how do you get that engagement, I suppose, is the key. And as a small company, it's perhaps easier than as a big company.
Yeah, aligning incentives is, I think, one of the biggest issues. I work in healthcare, and it's the biggest single issue in the United States healthcare system. And that the people who are operating in the system don't have aligned incentives. There are some people for whom one person's good result is another person's very, very bad result. And it's not just not aligned, they're not divergent, they're actually in direct conflict when you'd think that they would be aligned. And that ends up with a system that is fundamentally dysfunctional. But that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody? I mean, Barry, you've got successful experience of this, but anybody else also got any experience of how you get your team aligned with the ultimate incentive, which is survival and growth? Well, survival is an obvious one because it keeps paying our wages, but growth and profit and developing the business and sales and quality and so on. How do you actually encourage people in a way that is, efficient and also has the best possible chance of success? Ram, go for it.
A couple of examples from one of my previous jobs where I was leading the stress analysis and validation team, where we were doing the what was then the world's biggest wind turbine gearbox. Now, obviously, as an engineer used to working in a little corner of our own office space, you don't have that much control over incentivizing people. So motivating people in a non-incentivized, non-monetary way became a need of the hour. So the idea was, right, what are we doing? We're not doing stress analysis. We're not doing FEA. We are helping build and test and validate the world's biggest wind turbine gearbox. It's like going for a Guinness record. Let's focus on that and give it our best. That's what we did when we were doing that work. Secondly, looking at going forward, moving forward, let's say 7-8 years to what we do at Equitas, where we were doing some work for the European Space Agency's supply chain, where we were helping with the development of the Sentinel 4 and 5 satellite programs. Again, the idea was we're not doing mechanical design. We're not building ground support equipment. We are helping validate instrumentation that is going to go up and do Earth monitoring, which is going to help perhaps have better agricultural yield, perhaps feed people in a data-driven better manner, try and help save lives. So the idea was, let's look at what it is that we're trying to achieve above and beyond our 9-to-5 jobs and what contribution we make and how it affects what's going on. Yeah, it sounds quite cliched, but it has worked. It has worked for us. So that's what we did.
That reminds me, I wrote a piece, I think it was on LinkedIn some time ago. It was titled, "What Business Are You In?" And I'll tell you a very quick story that I used to introduce it, which was that I was at a networking event many years ago, God, ages ago. And it was BNI, I think. And I was in the bar talking to this fellow, and I said, "What do you do?" He said, "I'm a debt collector." And I said, "Have you ever wondered whether you might just change the way you describe yourself and maybe change your business at the same time?" He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, why don't you say that you're in the cash flow management business? And then instead of worrying about picking up debts, you can also help them maybe get their invoices in as well." And he did that, and he sort of tripled the size of his business within a year. And it's about knowing what business you're in. If you haven't seen the movie The Founder, I urge you to see it. Has anybody here seen it?
No.
It's about Ray Kroc and the birth of McDonald's. And
Okay.
it is an absolutely brilliant business movie, as well as being just, Michael Keaton is superb. But there was Ray Kroc trying to sell franchises, and somebody said to him, "What business are you in?" He said, I'm selling franchises." He said, "No, you're not. You're in the property business. Once you understand the property business, then that will change your life." And it did. And McDonald's just took off from the moment that happened. So, Ram, I really understand what you're saying. If you're not focusing on a piece of kit, you're focusing on the benefit it'll bring the wider business, then that is a hugely important thing to do. Does anybody else have any sort of wider vision about what business they're in? If that makes any sense.
I mean, as usual, I've tried out a few daft things in my time, and it was slightly different. This was when I first started to become a formal manager, and I was in a fortunate position that I had the people I managed tend to be quite highly technical, quite highly skilled, and part of my review process, or just I like to speak to them quite regularly, was what did they think my job was? And I said, well, I'm your manager. My job is I'll put it like this: my job is to make your dreams come true. Okay, but to do that, you've got to do the same for me. So people would come up, and one guy said to me, "Look," he says, "What do you want to do?" What he says, "Well, I want to play golf." Play golf 2 days a week and still have the weekends off. I said, well, if you want to do that, you've got to probably be a consultant. So how do we get you from where you are to being a consultant? And he sort of looked at me a bit strange. And I said, look, I know that if I get you motivated and you're working towards something that brings you something and the company something, you're going to tow 2 or 3 people with you. With some sort of planned move on, we will have people knowing people want it. Your position will not be dead man's shoes. Your position will become available. There will be people who know that opportunities are. So I think that sort of worked. I mean, I spoke to another person who was just basically at the start of their career, and they were just working to get themselves some sort of basic Scott Beck management ticket, and they'd sort of been wound up there by their boss a bit that they should aspire to be in the engineering manager, which there would never be in there. There'd never be not really a realistic goal to start off with. But simply by reinforcing with that person, actually by running a household, getting the kids to school, coming in and doing a job, plus 2 nights a week doing some work on a Scott Beck, getting some basic management skills, was going to help her to make her dreams come true. And with that sort of motivation, I didn't find that getting the general crap that we had to do during the day was particularly difficult. People knew that they would do that bit, and then they would have this other more interesting stuff to do, which was for them and for the company.
So it is about having it's about acknowledging that that people have bigger visions than what one suspects they might otherwise bring to work.
Yeah.
Mark, what about you? You spent your time on automotive before getting into automation. What was your experience of that?
I just checked my microphone wasn't muted. I think my experience, whether it's the pressure of automotive and it being a project-based business or business turnarounds, is really you need engagement from the people. If you think of the Kaizen principles, it's little improvements because people know what they're doing. So you need to share the understanding with your team. They need to understand a common goal, and then it's move forward. But it's really about sharing information, getting engagement, and then delivering performance off the back of that. But it's all about people, and so the next few years are going to be really difficult if we lose people.
Yeah, Julian, welcome.
Hello, sorry for a late arrival. Yeah.
Not at all, not at all. Julian's a chum of mine for many years now, and I'm glad you were able to make it, Julian. There's a topic I want to get onto that may well interest you because you have been involved with one of the people involved in the conversation. Do you want to give us a sort of 10-second overview of who you are and what you do so that people know who you are?
Crikey.
Come on.
You normally get a few seconds to get your head around that sort of thing when you join. But right now, if I not give you the long story, but the quickie, I made a lot of money out of building a stockbroking company in the lead up to the dot-com boom. It was called E-Trade UK, and we did a spectacular trade sale, and I've been an angel investor for about for the 20 years. We sold in January 2000, and I worked for the ill-fated British Satellite Broadcasting and for France Telecom in telecoms and media, and 9 years with Reuters on assignment belatedly in Israel, West Bank, and Gaza. So I suppose my sort of core expertise is in consumer markets and content and expertise in that area. But if there's any excuse for me joining on this call, it's because my father actually ran a really successful manufacturing company, and it was the saddest day of his life when he asked his 30-year-old son, who thought he was doing quite well in Reuters, to take over the business because he wanted to retire. And I told him no. And I really, I feel so sorry that I didn't do it, because manufacturing now, I would have loved to have gone back and run that company now. But anyway.
What did they
make? Electronic components from the, do you remember the Black & Decker Hover Bother? The lawnmower, and it made they made components for Remington shavers and Black & Decker drills, and I think one part went into every Opel car in Europe. So it was an electronics company based out in Hainault in Essex, but sadly he sold the business through what was 3i, and yeah, so there we go.
Well, Julian, we've been discussing I guess one word to describe it would be resilience. How does a company prepare itself for existential shocks like a lot of people are being laid off because of COVID, and then of course there's Brexit coming down the track at us like an out of control locomotive, and we're also talking about one of the reasons. One of the solutions people have been coming up with is about getting your team aligned and making certain that your business was aligned entirely from the production line through to sales, and getting everybody involved in the process in such a way that they maximum amount of effort and was aligned and streamlined towards getting cash, and cash is king, into the business. But one of the other issues I wanted to raise tonight, and given that we've gone past the half hour, this might be an opportune moment. Julian, a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about how we in this country don't value necessarily the right things. And there's been a lot of talk this last week or so about the sale of ARM to NVIDIA by its former Japanese owner. But it's raised a lot of hue and cry. Now, you happen to know Herman Hauser, who was, I think he was your business partner as well as being ARM's business partner. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, well, he founded ARM with a consortium up in Cambridge, yes. And
yeah, so all I'm really saying is that do we have our priorities right in this country? Because just as your father found it difficult to pass his company on or keep it going as itself, it obviously ended up in some sort of conglomerate somewhere or bought out by somebody else. Why is it we're so bad at keeping businesses in this country, particularly strategically important ones like ARM? Anybody got any thoughts on that?
Well, Nick, I mean, but jumping in before anyone speaks, but the question is, what do you mean by keeping in this country? Because actually, an awful lot of the ARM was bought by SoftBank, and the reason SoftBank are selling it is that SoftBank have got a whole lot of problems with their portfolio. I mean, they're mega private equity firm, as we all know, and they've got significant problems, and they're on a cash recovery. So the sale of ARM wasn't okay. I mean, it's touted in the press that they bought it for 18 and sold it for 38 or something like that. But the reality is, they spent billions on the wrong direction and sort of didn't particularly help ARM. But I think if you, like Brighton Rock, if you cut through ARM now, very little of it would be Cambridge based. For all the fuss that Herman Hauser is making about retaining a British company, he's using that as a bandwagon. But the reality is that most of the operations of ARM are out of the country. That's my understanding. I don't know whether anyone knows. Well,
I guess what I'm trying to say is that why is if you've got a significant manufacturer in the UK, the way that it brings true value to the country is for there to be a sort of supply chain and a cluster and a network around it. But what I'm hearing you say is that by the time it got sold to NVIDIA, it was more of a shell, and that everything else had moved offshore. And that's, I guess, what I'm saying is that the true added value in manufacturing is down to building your supply, your component supply base in the UK. We've got the talent, we've got the expertise. Why doesn't it happen? It would happen more likely if we had a British ownership. But anyway, can anybody else please jump in here? Otherwise, Julian and I are going to go off on one.
Yeah,
please,
I'll jump
Angela.
Oh,
sorry.
Yeah,
Angela,
I'll quickly jump in. I'll go on then, Angela.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think we've seen it happen quite a lot in this country. I mean, if you look at Cadbury's, for example, great British company, but they don't actually manufacture in this country any longer. And I think it goes back to what we were saying a couple of weeks ago, how, a lot of this work is sent abroad where they can do it cheaper. I believe it's the same with Waterford Crystal in Ireland. That's manufactured abroad as well. Now it's no longer manufactured in Ireland. As I say, when I worked at Lucas's 30 odd years ago, that I think that was the start of it, when they started shipping work off to Malaysia. And I don't think there's very much left of Lucas's anymore. And I think, as Julian was saying, if you look at ARM now, most of it is done abroad, and I think that happens to a lot of our manufacturing companies.
Sam, sorry.
ARM isn't a manufacturing company, is it?
No, it's not.
It's a design company, and it has intellectual property, basically. Yeah.
And where is
the the fuss over ARM, Nick, is that it's being sold to. I mean, ARM does the base layer software on which bespoke mobile chips are developed by the individual mobile operator. And the clever thing about it is that everybody can end up with something that they want for their product, but use it on a common base. But the fuss, it's probably what's the word? A diversification against, Nick, what you're talking about, because this is a company. The fuss is the fact that it's been sold to an organization with a vested interest, competition to everybody else, and it's going to result in, as Hermann Hauser have said, the demise of the company, because instead of having a worldwide potential audience for its products, obviously, the purchaser now is only going to use it to its own benefit. It's going to restrict supply to other people, which is the problem.
Well, it is interesting that the core component that ARM works with is actually a British technology, the compound semiconductor, and there's a cluster in Wales. And that's still very, very British. But the trouble is that, I think I may have mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, it's like, we're experts at building the house bricks, but somebody else goes away and makes the house. And that's where all the value is. But we've got the core technology is British still, the compound semiconductor. And they're trying to build these companies that can create the applications from compound semiconductors, so we don't have to buy them overseas. It's very much a ground up thing that they're doing at the Catapult in Newport. Sam, you wanted to say something on this.
All I was going to add to it, I was reading through Adam's post as well when that went up, and a lot of people were talking about companies having to shout a little bit more about what they do, and it isn't done enough in this country. People just kind of go under the radar, and they've got their core clients and they've got their core business, and they're kind of happy with that. But then when something goes wrong in that business, they're a bit lost with what to do. Goes back to what Steve was saying earlier about the marketing side of things and actually talking about and having a bit more of a plan. There's, down in the southwest where I am, for example, there's people that I speak to every day that just didn't have a clue that there was a company just around the corner from them that could do something that they were sending overseas. And it's just little things like that which I think need to be shouted about a little bit more, and people need to actually talk about what they're doing.
Yeah, well, naturally, I would agree 100% with you. Ram, please.
Is that ambition? Is that ambition of leaders? Because I think if we educated our leaders, we're classic in the UK, aren't we? Like, good footballer makes football coach. People, family businesses, it's all because it's the family, you're now in charge. If we were to educate leaders, once people become leaders, they don't run courses anymore in the UK. It's like, well, that's when you should do more courses. No, I'm really busy. I'm running the shit. No. You won't sign for Manchester United and pack in training, would you? It's like, we just don't do it. And ambition as a culture, probably not the people on this call, because you wouldn't be on this call if you had something about you. But in the UK, we're very much a culture of just enough. 5 type thing. We've got very, quite lazy, haven't we, and comfortable because we're unionized and this, that, and the other, and we're not developing like we were in the 50s and 60s. So if we had that ambition, you'd be out there shouting about it, and you would be growing. There's not many people that we're not exporting enough. I was on a call with one of the ministers last week before. And one of his closing remarks was, and I was giving him a bit of a hard time about it, and I couldn't stop myself when he said it. He went, and don't forget, we're still 9th best manufacturing country in the world. I went, all right, brilliant, because when we go to the World Cup, we want to finish 9th, don't we? It's just like, it's that ambition, isn't it?
We're just all lack thereof.
I think it's I could chip in. I think in a lot of industries, and this is certainly true of the software industry, which I'm more in than anything to do with manufacturing. There's definitely been a sort of resurgence of sort of rock stars in the industry. I mean, we all, you know, from Zuckerberg to whatever. And if I had to stop and think, who are the manufacturing rock stars? Because if you've got rock stars, then people coming out of university think, I don't want to do investment banking or being an accountant or whatever. You know, this industry or these things look fun. I want to be like that person. And okay, we've got James Dyson, but if you ask me who runs JCB, no idea. Just come back from a holiday in Scotland. Number of JCB trucks I passed on the way down. I'm thinking, blimey, you know, really exciting stuff, but I've no idea about it. I mean, I know, Nick, that's very much what you're doing, is elevating as media, you know, knowledge of the sector. But I think it's a long-term game, isn't it, to make the industry exciting, you know, and it is exciting. There's lots of stuff, and as you were saying, in the West Country, you know, people just don't. How would they know if it's not publicized? That's what needs to happen.
I think there's a couple of things. I think. Sorry, Angela. Just two things.
Yep.
One is, you know, we talk about why don't we do any more manufacturing or anything in Britain anymore. I think we need a bit of introspection as consumers. How many of us are actually willing to pay for something that's made in Britain to use in our personal lives? The cups, the phones, the shirts we wear, the clothes. Secondly, why aren't we not creating the NVIDIAs? We are worried about ARM being sold to NVIDIA, but we have the intellectual horsepower to create 10 NVIDIAs. Why aren't we doing that? Maybe that's the question we need to also be asking ourselves. Why aren't we doing it? Elon Musk went from South Africa to America, but it's actually closer to travel to the UK from South Africa. Why didn't we attract Elon Musk to the UK? Why did he go to America? Questions like that is what we need to answer, I think.
Well, I suspect, and maybe I'm being cynical, but you know, some of the answers may not necessarily please us, and I think an awful lot of the time we're happy to play happy being ninth. I agree with you, Barry, that okay, on a question of scale, if it's just done by numbers, maybe we are, but the fact of the matter is that 12 months ago we were 8th, now we're 9th, and that's not the right direction to be going in at all. You know, so there's a whole heap of issues. We're not going to solve them on this, but I do take Ram's point that you know, we have got the skills. After all, as I mentioned, the compound semiconductor technology is British. It was formed at BT Labs at Martlesham in order to facilitate fiber optic communications. That's what compound semiconductors were for. Most of us will have recognized them as being the little lasers that drove our CD players. That's what one of their first consumer technologies was. But they've gone on to become the things without which smartphones can't operate. Every time you pick up your phone and the screen comes on, that's a compound semiconductor doing that job. And the wafers, they're built to order, as Julian said. That's how the chip makers say, I want a semiconductor that's going to do this. And then IQE Limited, PLC rather, they go off and do it. So, you know, the technology stems from here, but we haven't been able to create, you know, the whatever it is that starts a company. Well, we did, I suppose. ARM was created in Britain using British technologies, but
Didn't ARM
it's
come
gone
from
away.
apricot computers?
I think it did, actually. Yes, I think it did.
I thought it came, and basically ARM was basically apricot RISC machines, because it just uses designs a reduced instruction set processor. Yeah.
Yes, it
got
had
me there.
No, it had its roots in the BBC Micro and the very lowly technologies right at the beginning. Yeah. Well, not lowly technologies, small scale manufacturing and innovation. Yeah.
But I remember somebody showing me an apricot computer back in the day, And it was distinctive because the text color on the screen, if I'm not incorrect, was actually orange or apricot. It wasn't green like other computers. Their text was. But of course, if that's what went into ARM, absolutely. So it's all there, but we just don't seem to have that sort of ability anymore to build on it, or else people just want to cash out, or even, and this is perhaps Julian again, where you can maybe comment, the way that private equity / VC / patient capital is organized in this country isn't conducive to building long-term patient growth businesses, and manufacturing needs patient long-term growth.
I think it starts. There's a lot of statistics, and they're easily findable of the ability to raise capital in Europe against West Coast in the States, let's say, and it's not just the relative scale of Britain to America in terms of the number of companies needing funding. There's a massive disparity in the ability to raise risk capital. But I mean, to put a positive thing on it, there's a lot going on with, okay, I mean, or maybe jinxed with Brexit, but there's, significant funding initiatives are taking place, and they're all leveraged, meaning, the government catalyzes a funding initiative and then looks for a gearing of 5 to 10 from private equity. And I think it's getting, my sense is it's getting better organized, the sources of capital. So, I mean, the reason that people put businesses offshore is because that is where the shareholders say, actually, no, we're not investing in an overseas business. We're investing in an American company. We want it to be incorporated in Delaware, and we'll put all the funding in, and we know all the infrastructure, and we know how to finance that. Why do we want to finance something in Britain? Sort of like, what do we know about labor laws and the complexities there? So I would suggest it starts with where the capital is. If there was limitless sources of capital, I'm sure there'll be more manufacturing in the UK, or is that just a sweeping statement?
We're going to chip in one other big difference in the US is a thing called the Bayh-Dole Act, which enables researchers in an academic environment to cooperate with either entrepreneurs or existing businesses. And the academics can actually benefit from whatever intellectual property comes out of their research. And what this has turned into is a very, very large revenue stream into the universities. There's one very, very well-known, very large drug, for example, where about 12% of its global revenue, where the global revenue in this particular case is measured in many billions of dollars, goes to Emory University in Atlanta, in Georgia. And the people who worked on that project get a substantial income from it, so long as they remain working at the university. So again, it comes down to this alignment of incentives. The incentive is to do fabulous new research that turns into intellectual property, because that can then be converted into revenue stream income. And a number of universities now have stopped. For example, the California Caltech, one of the most advanced technical universities in the world, their tenured professors have a zero salary because they're all paid from the revenue that's earned by the university from the intellectual property that they create. It's no longer down to publish, which is what it used to be. Tenure is now about intellectual property. And that generates interest with local entrepreneurs, and as Julian just said, the access to readily available risk capital it just fundamentally changes the entire mix.
It used to be candy from a baby. Not very clued up universities had their intellectual property nicked by clever venture capitalists. But that's changing.
And now they've all got, I mean, the University of Maryland, which is just up the road here, their technology transfer department has got over 40 people working in it.
Mm-hmm.
And their entire job is the out-licensing of Maryland University of Maryland intellectual property. That gives you an idea of the scale of the thing.
I've seen that very actively in a couple of universities in Spain, but I think that's a glimmer of hope, because there's less reticence, is what you're saying. In
absolutely,
it's a benign cycle of if we know that we're going to receive funds in the future from that IP, then it's worth us investing and encouraging students to work on it and develop the intellectual property.
Simon, could you possibly just type the name? Is it By? Was it Evan Bayh-Dole? B-A-Y-H?
Evan Bayh, Bayh-Dole, B-A-Y-H-D-O-L-E, Bayh-Dole. And all it does, yes, all it does is it just simply says that universities can pay a proportion of the revenue from licensed intellectual property to the people who worked on developing the original intellectual property. There's a whole pile of other stuff in there as well, but you know, that's the core thing.
All I know about the way it works over here is that you get university departments creating limited companies from which the same people can benefit, but that seems piecemeal. And as I say, I don't know a whole heap about it, but just my impression is that it's quite piecemeal, and it doesn't have that sort of generative power that what you're describing the American universities have. Maybe that is part of it as well.
Emory University doesn't have a football team, and they make more money from their intellectual property sales than they would if they had a national level football team. College football in America is a multi-billion-dollar business. But yeah, I mean, it fundamentally changes the nature of the relationship between the core research and the innovation that comes from that and the creation of companies.
Well, you have given me a great deal of food for thought there. So he jots down Bayh-Dole Act. We'll look at that. Listen, folks, we're coming up close to 7 o'clock, and I like to run a tight ship and let people get off to their supper or whatever bottle of vintage champagne they're quaffing tonight. Anybody got any quick final thoughts that they'd like to throw into the pot? Okay, hands up. Let's take a straw poll. Given what we've been witnessing over the last 24 hours, with the Kent border and chaos in the Channel, and of course, the worries about the COVID-19 layoffs. Hands up if we're feeling more positive today than we were this time last week. Alec, good man. 2. Well, you're in the United States. All right. Okay. I would say that was a diffident 3 out of 10.
All right.
But anyway, listen, thank you very much for joining us, for being on Kaizen Central this week. Really appreciate you being here. If you've been watching on YouTube, thank you as well for being with us. The recording will stay up for as long as there's space in YouTube servers. So that's great. Thank you all again. We'll be back at 6 o'clock next Thursday. This is Nick Peters for Kaizen Central. Thank you for being with us, and a very good evening.
Thank you all. Have a good weekend. See you in a week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.